The first thing is that, it usually takes, and this is worldwide, and it wouldn't be different for New Zealand, it usually takes about 5 years before somebody, on an average, before someone who has fibromyalgia is diagnosed. Now that's a long time, and the reason is that fibromyalgia doesn't fit nicely into the medical model. The doctors are all taught a certain number of things, and you've got to have a disease, and the disease you've got to be able to take a chomp out and look at it under a microscope, or do a test, or use a fancy machine and take a scan, and there you can see it. Aha, that's what you've got. The problem with fibromyalgia is that it doesn't fit into that model, and so a lot of the doctors you see either still don't believe it exists, it's like a figment of your imagination, or if they do, they don't know very much about it. It's not taught in medical schools, and in ongoing medical education, which I'm part of, there's not a lot of teaching about fibromyalgia, but it is a reality. You're living it, and for myself, I've looked after hundreds of people with fibromyalgia over the years, and it's not a diagnosis of exclusion, which is what most doctors believe. For me, I can sit down and talk for 5 minutes, and I know you have fibromyalgia. Or everybody walks that particular, it's a very specific walk. And struggling for up to 5 years, or sometimes much longer, makes it just so much harder, doesn't it, really, before you actually get that diagnosis. So let's just start very basic. Fibromyalgia. So, syndrome. Now it's important. So you've got fibro, which means fibrous tissue. And fibrous tissue is the glue that holds us all together. So our body is full of fibrous tissue, which is your ligaments and your tendons, and this is the stuff that stops everything going ping and falling out on the road. So that's the first part of it. My is muscle. And this is all Greek, and it literally is Greek. And algia is pain. So it's pain in your muscles and your soft tissues. That's what it is. And the other word is syndrome. Now, syndrome's a fascinating thing. A syndrome is a collection of signs and symptoms. So there are a lot of syndromes around, and a syndrome is not a disease. They're different, quite different. So a syndrome, well, let's take a disease. What is a disease? Disease is what doctors not perhaps like, but what doctors are pretty good at. So a disease means that you caught pneumonia, and so you're sick and you're running a fever. What can you do? Well, you can, take an X-ray, and there it is, and you can do a blood test, and there are these changes, and you can cough up stuff, and so you can say, aha, there is this process going on caused by this problem, which we can see objectively. Other diseases are things like rheumatoid arthritis, where you have a hot, swollen joint, and you can take a biopsy and you can sort it out, and that is a disease. Cancer is a disease. So what diseases do is, if I was to measure, what happens is you get worse. If you don't jump in and stop that process, it's going to eat you. It's going to destroy you. So a disease needs to be actively treated, and there's a destructive process. Sorry, welcome everybody.
Sorry, I'm late.
That's okay. That's okay. We're just starting very basic with what fibromyalgia is, and we're talking about the difference between, because it's called fibromyalgia syndrome, and a syndrome is, as I said before, it's a collection of symptoms and signs. And what that means is, gee, these people have got all these things, and but there's no disease process going on. So basically, we put them all into a big box. We say, that's a syndrome, but there's no underlying destructive process or no underlying active process that is going to get worse and worse. That's a syndrome. And the syndrome, the way a syndrome goes is it goes, use a different colour, it goes like this. It gets worse, gets better, wobbles, get worse, gets better. That's not very good. So, like that. And so syndromes, where there's no underlying destructive process, tend to follow a course where there are flares. It gets better, it flares and better, but, and this is so important with fibromyalgia, you do not get worse. If you diagnose with cancer, you're going to get worse unless you jump in and chop it out, do something. But with fibromyalgia, as time goes on, you don't get worse. You kind of live with it, you manage it, and what you do is you manage the flares, and when the flares are finished, you don't end up having something that you used to do before, like multiple sclerosis. You suddenly have a flare. At the end of the flare, you find that you can't do something that, now this thing doesn't work. And fibromyalgia is not true. You feel like you might die, but the truth is you won't. Fibromyalgia is non-fatal, it is non-progressive. That's really, yes.
I was just wondering, when they sort of call it chronic pain,
Yes.
and you have sort of a group of, because I've, for example, had problems with the right side,
Yes.
but then of course that can be like a syndrome of chronic pain on that side, but then you get other pains in different places.
Yes.
So is that sort of like an addition to the syndrome, or is it just...
That's all part of the syndrome. You see, the point about the point of fibromyalgia, remember in the definition it's pain. Pain in muscles and tendons. So the pain of fibromyalgia is the essence of that syndrome is you have pain. The pain is chronic. Now, a lot of people in New Zealand have this idea that if you say the pain is chronic, they think, oh, it's really bad. But in a strict medical sense, chronic means it lasts a long time. So that's what chronic pain is. So for fibromyalgia, you have chronic, which is pain by definition, has to be at least for 3 months. And for people with fibromyalgia, it can be for years. It has to affect all 4 quadrants of your body. So, over time, now that's the key. So in other words, all 4 quadrants means everywhere, pain everywhere, but it's not all at the same time. And the point about fibromyalgia pain is that it shifts around. It is weird and wacky. It doesn't make sense.